introduced tonight.
Well, Keith's going to cover most of that. And let me just say, it's a pleasure to have Keith back with us, Bill. He's done an outstanding job as town manager to this point, and really have...
He's our first repeat guest.
He's really have enjoyed working with him. November, we all know that regardless of what happens, because of who's running for re-election, there'll be an almost entirely new board of directors with new faces.
There are only 3 incumbents seeking re-election out of 7 available seats.
Out of 7 people, so at the most there'll be 3 people there that already have experience with the government of this town. Well, all of them have experience somehow with it, not to say they don't. What would be your message to them? What should they be doing?
Post-election, we sit down and we set a vision and we work together. The most daunting task over the next year will once again be the municipal budget. Because the state revenue, if the biennium passes if the governor signs it or if she allows it to become law, the funding for fiscal 10-11 to cities and towns is exactly the same as 9-10, is exactly the same as 8-9. Our grand list has seen some growth, but nothing of any magnitude. So we will more or less have the same amount of revenue to spend that we have this year, with more demands on our infrastructure and other parts of the system. That will be the most difficult task come January when we begin, well, yes, come January when we put the budget together and when the board begins to fine-tune it in the spring and it goes to the voters in May. That is the most daunting task, and we need to focus all our energies and skills on that task to make sure, again, I don't have all the right ideas, I don't have all the ideas, I'm willing to listen to any more ideas, but nobody likes to see any more positions eliminated through layoffs because it has a trickle-down effect that's detrimental to the entire community and the economy as a whole. So we need to be very smart and very accurate when it comes time to put this budget together, because it is the most important task of this incoming Board of Selectmen.
Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron, October 21st, 2009, my next to last show. The last show will be next week, as I'll mention later. Well, tonight we will play some clips from the excellent monthly economic development program on Channel 13, Charter Communications, called the Winchester Business Update. You saw a quick shot of their green logo there. That program is excellent. It's about mainly the Economic Development Commission's work to try to get more businesses into town, keep the ones we have, get more retail, industrial, any kind of stuff into town. And they work hard on it. There's a commission for that. And the chairman of that is John Marisi, who you'll see. He's on the right side of the screen. And then you'll see the EDC commission member. I think he's the vice chairman, William Pratt, there as well. So they host the program. And a few months ago, they had our town manager, Keith J. Robbins, on the show. And the clips tonight were taken from that program. And John and Bill had the town manager there as their guest, and they asked him several questions. The opening clip was of John and Bill complimenting the town manager. How's that for an unusual set of statements on his performance to date? The second clip was Keith answering the question, and this is a paraphrase of the question. There will be a new Board of Selectmen soon. What would be your message to them? And he gave you that answer. I'll repeat those 2 clips, if time, at the end of the program tonight for anybody who tuned in late. Now, I had another dream this week. I have a lot of dreams. They've helped me throughout my life, these dreams. This time it was not Rose Nader. This time it was my great-grandfather, Winston, lifelong resident, Civil War veteran. He joined early before he was of age, and knife factory employee, William R. McGrane. He died at 93 and is buried in Winston with a Confederate bullet in his leg. So my connections to Winston go back 150 years, if not more. Here's what I remember of the dream. My great-grandfather said, "Brian, thanks for the work that you have done over the last 5 years that may possibly benefit the town. You deserve a long rest. I agree with you that the schools need to run like a business and that Gilbert should be an integral part of any short to medium and possibly long-term consolidation plans. The taxpayers certainly can't afford $50 to $80 million for a new town high school, and certainly they don't need one since enrollment is dropping in Winsted, and there is plenty of room for students at Gilbert. I also agree with you that the Board of Education should be run as a business. That's where the major problems can be resolved. If you have enough finances, the education part will take care of itself with some good help from the educators that may not be very good business people. The K through 9 test scores, well, that is unthinkable and a major embarrassment for the school system and the town of Winchester. Past heads of the Economic Development Commission have said that the test scores are the first question that people ask before they move their businesses to town, because they don't want their children to come to a town that doesn't have a top-notch education system. The Board of Education can continue to blame anyone that they want to, but they have to accept the responsibility for their lack of performance over the last 4 years. They have had their chance. Nobody micromanaged them. They had their chance, and they seem to be failing. I agree with you, Brian, that the petitioners shouldn't be elected again, as they have had their chance. Let's give the Republican candidate and the 3 Democrats running for the Board of Education a chance to solve our management problems. Please try to convince the voters to do the right thing for Gilbert and K through 8 by voting for the Republican Board of Education and Democrat Board of Education candidates, even though the town committee may not be backing them formally and helping them to succeed. And let's not re-elect the 3 petitioners who are responsible for the running of the system over the last 4 years. Let's get new vision and new leadership. That should help us all. The Civil War ended 150 years ago, Brian. Please help to end the new K through 8 Gilbert Civil War. Let's have an integrated plan for consolidation. Thanks for listening, and please keep up playing the banjo. It was a major instrument during the Civil War. And then I said, well, thanks to you, great-grandfather, for the advice. Next week will be my final program, and I will have a very special guest to provide some answers to some very difficult questions that I'm rounding up from the community. If you're interested in the November 3rd, 2009 local election, it may be well worth your time to tune in and skip one of the baseball games. And now to the agenda. Comments I made with the help of my great-grandfather. Then I'm going to talk a lot tonight about the town manager, Keith J. Robbins, and I'm going to show about 10 clips from that program. You'll also see John Marisi and Bill Pratt on there with them. I'll introduce each clip very shortly. I didn't have time to show the whole program, so Charter has agreed to play the whole program tomorrow night at 5 o'clock on Channel 13 for anybody interested to see the whole program. I think I got about a half of it on here, but there are other interesting things on that program, and you will really see a positive town manager. And if time, and I don't know if we'll have enough time, but if time, we will once again show the clip of the Democratic selectman and liaison to the Recreation Board, and perhaps perhaps, I'm not positive about this, perhaps a substitute teacher at Region 7 from time to time. Michael Renzulo's marijuana suggestions to the police chief at a recent Board of Selectmen meeting. So he's suggesting that perhaps during overtime he may not follow the laws of the state of Connecticut. Election Day, November 3rd, 2009. Days to election, 13. Weeks to election, 2. Months to election, 0.25. Final weekly program, Planning for Success. You can never say never, but for now, it won't be for quite a while. But Planning for Success, Wednesday, October 28th, 2009. Now, I just want to show quickly the town charter. And last week I mentioned that it was incorporated. But I think before I show the town charter, I try to find my slides that I have of the information I put up last week about the test scores and Connecticut Mastery test scores. And at the time I hesitated a little because I told you that there were some people who, I think it was mainly Blaise Salerno, the superintendent of the K-8 schools, who mentioned on one of the programs that perhaps there was better information out there on the internet that put these scores in a more positive light. But since then, I found out that these are, the ones we showed last week, are the right test scores. So what I will do is I will get my copies. If not, I'll get them made again. And on next week's program, it will be one of the questions that I will pose to my special guest, and we'll discuss it once again, the test scores for the state of Connecticut. So now, the Winston Charter, remember I told you it was incorporated, there it is, incorporated 1771, and it always shines with the lights and everything, so I won't leave it up long. But I'm going to talk a bit about that tonight, because the Charter, Article 5, Town Manager, Section 501, appointment. So in the Charter, Article 5, Town Manager, Section 501, they talk about many things there, but I'm going to just talk about the appointment of the Town Manager. So I'm reading now from the Charter, excerpted from the Charter. The Board of Selectmen shall appoint a Town Manager who shall be the Chief Executive Officer of the town to serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen, and who shall be chosen exclusively on the basis of his executive and administrative qualifications, character, education, training, and experience. Now, I want to point out that this says, if you watch the whole program at 5 tomorrow night, you'll see John Morisi saying to him, boy, you must have a target on your forehead. You must be targeted man in town, town manager of this town. And Keith said, well, he could probably live with that. So watch it tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. It's very interesting. I don't have a clip of that tonight. But this town manager was chosen unanimously by all 7 selectmen from a list of applicants. And they all followed the Charter, or they wouldn't have chosen him. Now there has been some talk, or it's mainly political talk by the Democrats, that perhaps he doesn't have enough education for this, but nobody seems to agree with him on that. He seems to be doing a fine job, as you heard John Morisi say at the beginning of the program. The selectmen received, the town manager received 2 very good reviews. I put the word excellent here. The first one was extremely good. It was unanimous. The second one was more of a met expectations type thing. And there was one person, Selectman Ham, who said he thought he did better than what the other 6 had thought. So he received a very good second review as well. So here's a man that was chosen by the 7 selectmen, received 1 excellent review and 1 good review, and it seems to be doing a very good job. Now, I know a lot about CEOs and COOs, Chief Executive Officers and Chief Operating Officers, having been them myself and been around them all my life and learned a lot from them. This guy's good. There's no doubt in my mind about it. He's taking on some tough stuff, as you'll see when we go through the clips tonight. He's tackling some of the toughest issues during the worst recession since the Depression. He didn't come in here for a picnic. He came into a tough situation. He wasn't here very long before the recession hit. He was not responsible for his first budget. He wasn't even here when it was put together. So you got to give the guy a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. And most of his decisions during these tough times are tough decisions. They're hard decisions. And you don't encourage town managers by jumping on them whenever they make a decision and running to the newspapers and suing them and all that kind of thing. So what you got to do is support the town managers like the 5 Republican selectmen have been doing for the last year and a half. And the EDC leadership has also been very positive about this town manager, and I'm pretty sure will continue to be so. There are people who are not so positive and would like to see him leave if they get elected. And there's been taunting of the town managers, there's been micromanagement of the town manager by the Indocrats, and he put up with it very well, a lot better than I would have done, I can tell you that, in his circumstance. But we have had, over the last 3 terms, 3 different town managers. He's a 3rd. And the middle one had a totally different philosophy than the first and the 3rd one. And we can't keep switching back and forth. If the Democrats get elected and the Democrats, and they're in the majority, you'll switch to another, a whole different in philosophy, big bond issue, against the development revenue coming into town, all that kind of stuff. So you don't want to do that. You want to stick with the selectmen and this town manager, and my little effort here tonight is to try to help you make up your mind in that direction. Let's elect the Republicans and maintain continuity. We need continuity. We can't go like a seesaw here. We can't be going back and forth. We've got to stick with a philosophy. When I first started the program, I said it's got to be at least 5 years. The recession has maybe made it a little longer than that. But you got to stick with them, back with them, get them in there again, and not be second-guessing them and turning the whole thing upside down. So we have to start from square one, going the wrong way on the progress triangle. I'll probably bring the triangles again next week and show you that. Let's elect the Republicans, maintain continuity, and keep the present town manager. That's very, very important for the future of our town. And we will now begin to play the clips. I'll introduce the first clip. This is a picture, no, I don't hear it. The Winchester Business Update, you'll see it in green, I think, again, maybe not. The Winchester Business Update Program logo and Town Manager Keith J. Robbins answering John Morissey's question, and this is a paraphrase of his question: what major difference have you experienced here since coming from your last job in Basra, Connecticut? This clip will last about 1 minute and 4 seconds.
I was unaccustomed to taking a budget to voters 6 times to get it passed. And to put a little background on that, I did come into a budget that was already created. One of the things I said to the board in January was, what did you want for a budget for 09-10? And they said they wanted a 0. And we brought it in at 0, all being a lot of pain to a lot of people, and it passed on the first vote. Because while I'm very familiar with the democratic process, we spend a lot of time and money sending it out 6 times, and it doesn't allow for the seamless operation of the community. Whereas this time, we did it in 1 time, and albeit a very small budget with if you actually run the numbers less than previous years, it's still a budget, and we know what we have to work.
Collected guy, very polished, a lot of very self-confident, despite the beating he's been taking and the tough job he's doing, and very proficient. The next clip will be William Pratt and John Morisi asking the town manager, what is the cost of each vote on the town budget, and the town manager's reply.
The series of referenda cost. What is the cost of each vote on a budget?
It's approximately, and I can't remember because I tried to forget that era, but it's in the $5,000 range. Whereas we're one and done. Folks came out and supported it overwhelmingly, so we moved on to the next challenge.
So would a 5 or 6 referendum year, we're spending up $30,000?
In the $25,000 to $30,000 range.
So essentially an employee in town.
A part-time employee, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And part of the budget that we put forward included some layoffs, some staff time reductions, some not filling of positions, some creative ways of not filling positions. We reduced an administrative assistant's position because she took an early retirement, and that allowed us to do some shifting. It could cut the wetlands enforcement officer and the planner to half-time. Nothing that I enjoyed doing, but they were necessities. Reduced some positions in the Public Works Department and didn't fill some positions in the Public Works Department that were also vacant. So we're getting leaner, and we will have to get even leaner based on the current projections that I see for future years. When you're in local government and at a community, most people don't realize that in most instances a large portion of your revenue comes from somebody else, either the state or the federal government. In our case, we garner approximately 25% of our revenue from the state of Connecticut. That number is shrinking. The legislatures last night passed a budget. Well, the governor has yet to sign it. It has revenue in it for cities and towns. That revenue is exactly the same as it was last year, which is what we budgeted to come to this community. But in future years, I don't see that revenue rising while our costs continue to rise. So we need to become even more self-sufficient at the local level. And to do that, we need to raise revenue. And to raise revenue, we need to increase our tax base.
Well, good for you, Keith. Keith knows we need to increase that tax base, and we do need a quantum leap, which is not likely to happen now, mainly because we didn't sell those 2 lots at Highland Lake. The Democrats didn't vote in favor of selling those 2 lots to the developer, and we lost a year or 2 because of that, or other reasons as well. In the next clip, John Morisi asked the town manager to discuss his accomplishments since he's been here in the town of Winchester. This clip will last about 3 minutes and 40 seconds.
Half now?
Pretty close.
Somewhere in that area. In your words, what would you say your accomplishments have been over that period of time? What have you brought to, in other words, what have you done for us? What have you brought to the party?
We've downsized our government structure by people, which, as I said, has been done through attrition and through layoffs. The more efficient way to do it is through attrition, because when you lay someone off from a government, because we have such a small turnover in employees, we have to pay that 66% of unemployment over the period of time. So the true savings is almost non-existent for an extended period of time. It's much easier to allow people to retire or to move on and not fill the positions, thus reducing your costs. We've improved our working relationship with the Board of Education, which is difficult in most communities because it gets territorial. We're partnering on more things than we used to partner on. I meet frequently with the superintendent and the business manager in an effort to economize the skill sets we have. And those are the most important things. We continue to do whatever's necessary to get the job done in these difficult economic times.
And what have we done to share costs between the town hall and the Department of Education?
We've done little things like sharing personnel when it's necessary. Public Works people do a few jobs here and there, and the Board of Education's electrician has assisted us once in a while. We're taking baby steps. There are some major things that at some point I would like to do that have been done in other communities, but currently the charter has a prohibition in it. In communities of this size and larger, in a few places, Mansfield, Colchester, those are the 2 that come to mind, they've combined the finance offices of their boards of education and general government. It's similar to two companies merging, and what do you do first? You combine your back office. And our charter currently has a prohibition in it. Now, it may not work, but we don't know unless we try. And it has worked in Colchester. That's worked for about 4 or 5 years, if memory serves me correct. In Mansfield, it's been done a lot longer than that. And other communities are looking at the needs to economize. I would like to see us at some point, and this scares people, but hire a facilities manager, and that individual would take care of all the town's buildings. So you don't get into a situation where you have $100,000 or $200,000 roof repair, or you have a tremendous amount of handicapped upgrades that need to be made to a public building. You have someone watching, and that way that person can mobilize the finite amount of resources we have, people and dollars, and put them in the right place at the right time. Other communities have gone to, instead of outsourcing trades like plumbing and electrical, they've gone to their public works people and said, who wants to do this? Is somebody interested in going to school? And they take, and they do, and they become electricians and plumbers. Then what happens, my friends tell me, is the custodial issues. They don't want to address the custodial janitorial issues. And that's fine. That's an easy one to outsource. There are a multitude of custodial janitorial firms in this state that work in state, federal, and local buildings where you can save some funds if you have tradespeople who are doing other jobs. But the fact of the matter is there's no more money coming. There's no more money coming for the foreseeable future. And we have very large needs from an infrastructure standpoint that will need to be addressed sooner than later. So we need to reduce our costs, our base costs, as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Okay, well, that's a good one. You got to remember now, we've only had a town manager here since 1961. That's about when the decay of the town started after the '55 flood. Before that, we used to have mayors over the years, and the mayors probably average around 5 years apiece, according to the research I'd done a few months back. And the town managers over since '61 have averaged about 3 1/3, the permanent ones. And then I didn't mention earlier, but there have been a lot of temporary ones. Just in the last 3 years, we probably lost 6 months to by having temporary. We had 2 or 3 temporary town managers. Bruce Gresick was in for 3 or 4 months. Before that, it would have been Henry Centrella or Mark Douglas, or I can't remember exactly who went now, but there's always been, I think Ray Carpentino was in there for a while back. So, you know, these 3 that I mentioned earlier in the program rapidly become 6 because of the interim ones, too. And that's all not good. Not good because when you take the local people that are working in the town and you make them interim town managers, they're not doing their own job, or they're going to have a tough time doing either job. Or they're doing their own job, perhaps not the town manager job. So the next clip I will introduce is the 3 people talking about, of all things, the roads in the town of Winchester.
Anyway, we're employing anyway can take care of.
A lot of it is, but there's hard costs that have not been addressed. For instance, we just recently paved Danbury Quarter Road, which was in pretty tough shape. And we've utilized, the board authorized in the budget to utilize state dollars to do that, to do a rehabilitation. We don't carry anywhere near the amount of funding we need in our budget to take care of asphalt maintenance. In my estimation, we should be carrying out of a $30 million gross budget, we should be putting in $250,000 to $500,000 on a yearly basis in asphalt maintenance. I know some years ago a bond was floated to do a few projects, and some of that included asphalt maintenance. What happens when you borrow to do asphalt maintenance is you will continually be borrowing. Because on average, if done correctly, most local roads will last 20 years from date of repaired properly to need to be repaired properly again. But if you do, I pick a number, $1 million in 1 year, you borrow it, well, 19 years later, you're going to have to borrow $2 million to fix the same things you fixed.
What do we spend right now on asphalt maintenance?
Very little.
Which is?
Less than $30,000.
So we should be spending $500,000.
Quarter to a half.
So we're spending about 1/10 of what we should be spending.
We could get by with a quarter. But it's important that the people realize that while the cost associated with the budget may not be palatable, the long-term ramifications of not funding it are even greater. We have other capital needs too, fire apparatus, vehicles, buildings. Very few people will argue with the fact that we need other fire facilities and we need a better police facility. And let's take the police facility. By getting the police department out of the town hall, it would allow us, free space for other town departments, such as the Board of Ed, which has recently vacated rental space and is operating out of bachelor school, so they're not paying rent anymore. But at some point, there may need to be a need for more students at bachelor school, so they would need to vacate again. And there's no reason why both education and general government employees can't operate in the same building. It's done in numerous communities, just quite simply because you're not paying any rent or you're not maintaining two separate structures.
Well, to get back to the roads just for a second, so that, I think it's a good example, and you could provide the actual information. With $30,000 spent on roads, for example, what percentage of the roads can we repave for $30,000?
We're not repaving roads, we're fixing potholes and doing Band-Aids.
So we're actually not...
Essentially just cold patch.
So we're actually not fixing anything. Whereas we should be spending about, we should be taking care of about 5% of those roads a year. And,
on a continuing asphalt maintenance. Yeah. I know there's some communities, I don't know if they still do it, and it's a little extreme in our community because of what a mill equates to, over $800,000, but in some of the smaller communities, they set aside a mill of revenue every year strictly for asphalt maintenance. The state of Connecticut provides to cities and towns what's called a Town Aid Road Grant, and it's an interesting formula that gives you X amount of dollars for dirt roads or unimproved and improved roads. However, that money used to come from the gas tax, which you pay at the pump. Because of Connecticut's current budget situation, the legislature and the governor, in the budgets that have been proposed and the one that was passed, that money is being shifted from the gas tax to borrowed money. I don't know why. I do know why, because the gas tax is being used to fund things that aren't associated with transportation. That money will take longer to come to the community. But if you take our local dollars and couple it with the state grants, as long as they continue to come forward, then you can really build an effective asphalt maintenance program so you don't end up in a situation where you have to borrow $10 million and where the phone rings off the hook every day because of deplorable roads, which in most cases I don't dispute they are.
So it would sound as though, to get off of Winstead for a moment, that even the state is not maintaining their roads. We know that bridges have always been a problem, but roads are more obvious, so we should see a degradation in those unless they're borrowing the money to maintain those roads.
The state of Connecticut will continue to borrow money as it has for the Department of Transportation. DOT receives funding from Federal Highway that's based on a formula grant as well. And the Northeast is losing money because of the more populous and powerful parts of the country where the population is growing, the Southwest and the Southeast. But at some point, we will reach critical mass. We've probably almost reached it now with the budget stalemate in Hartford, but next year will probably be the most difficult year for a municipal budget on record.
So both the state and the town are going down the same path of borrowing money for operating costs.
The State of Connecticut Bond Commission met in probably April, maybe May, to borrow $17 million. That $17 million was borrowed to cover payroll. That's not how you're supposed to operate.
No.
But that is where we are now.
So, getting back to other things that you've accomplished during your tenure here, is there anything else you'd like to comment on?
It's been a difficult time here because of the financial climate we're in. That takes up most of my time, just trying to make it all work and make sure we utilize our resources to the most efficient manner possible. It would be nice to do some budget projections long term, which I've started on, but because of the fluctuation in state revenue, it's not as easy to do that, or it's not as accurate. You can project.
Well, there's an uncertainty there as well.
There's a huge uncertainty when you're dealing with a quarter of your revenue. It would be nice to do more on the economic development front, and I can understand people's frustrations. It's interesting. Why can't you do something with these, quote, blighted buildings? Well, it's interesting because people who want you to do something with the blighted building are the same people that if we showed up tomorrow and told them their house was peeling and they had to paint it, they'd tell us to go pound sand. You can't just go take something. There's a lengthy process, and that process is in place to protect people's rights. We have an interesting concept on the table for one of the parcels, and we hope that comes to fruition, and we'll do everything we can to make that come to fruition. And hopefully that'll be the catalyst for other projects, but I would not be willing to say will be the catalyst. There's a lot of hopes and maybes because you don't know. I'm a glass half empty person. Unless the concrete is being poured and the steel is going up, it hasn't happened.
Okay, that was the town manager talking about the roads with John and Bill. Very interesting. He's really down to earth, tell it like it is, no spin type guy, and that's what we need. Town managers, project managers, CEOs, COOs have to tell it like it is. They can't say one thing and mean another. They can't do one thing and mean another. So if you ask Keith a question, you will get a straight answer. And as he says on this program, in a part that I do not have a clip of, that he tries to give short answers. His time is limited, and he has to get on with things, but he will always talk to people, and he will always give them answers. Sometimes they don't like the answers they get, but that's how it is when you make tough decisions and you run a business. The next clip, when asked about the prospects for the Winsted Furniture Building, the town manager discusses downtown Winsted.
A very good high-level overview job of what it would cost to do the project, and there's a need for some assistance in some manner, but that assistance can happen in a multitude of forms, not just some type of frozen real estate tax or tax abatement, but it can happen with in-kind services, with some dollars utilized for water and sewer connections, assistance with the electric connections, and so on. There's also historic tax credits available, but that market's at the moment a little soft because there aren't a lot of companies making a profit who want to purchase the tax credits.
Sure.
I've heard arguments like this, and I just want to hear your response to this question. They want to make this residential, which people always say, well, that's going to be more school children, that's going to be more taxes on the rest of us, we have to provide more services on that. Turning this into residential as opposed to factory lofts for businesses and jobs, how does that benefit economic development?
First of all, my philosophy has always been, if you don't want to educate children, don't get involved in local government, because that's one of our jobs. Actually, it says it in the state constitution. That guarantees an education K-12 for every eligible student in the state of Connecticut. Second of all, when you have a downtown and you have businesses like Super Saver, for instance, our local grocery store, or some of the restaurants and shops, without people, they don't stay in business. I'm positive most of them would love a captive audience with disposable income who could walk across the street to go to dinner and gee, I need a gallon of milk and a quart of OJ for breakfast tomorrow, or walk across the street, do a complete grocery list to cook dinner at home. Residential development in downtown is the only way downtowns will come back. That's how they started. The Hartfords, the New Haven, the Winsteds, everybody. They had people living downtown who worked and shopped and played downtown. Without those people, there will be no downtown.
Okay, well, yeah, you can see here, as you see for yourself, Keith has detailed knowledge of his job. He knows what's going on. He's been involved in it now for a year and a half, and he's been immersed in it, and he's got a real good idea. And he was also at the town summit meeting a year and a half ago, and he heard the business people express their concerns about downtown and the lack of a friendly environment for businesses as far as the land use boards are concerned, and the raggy image of the town that we tend to project ourselves. We're the ones who project that image, nobody else. You notice when you watch Keith, there's no sign of panic. He's under control. You don't see him panicking. You don't see him being wishy-washy. And that's a very good thing to observe. And he has his eye on the ball. He knows what he's trying to do. and he's trying to make it happen, and he's trying to get the coverage he needs from our selectmen. He does get it from about 5 of the selectmen. I don't think he gets much help from the other 2, the minority selectmen. It's just Brian's view. The next clip will be more on downtown.
Case, be it double income, no kids, empty nesters, or a single parent and a couple with a child, it's a win-win when you have people who are renting and can walk across the street to do their shopping, and perhaps some of them can walk down the street to go to work. It's a win-win when you have people downtown. There's no, it's the, again, to reiterate and be redundant, it's the only way to make downtowns work. And it adds diversity to the community as well. You can't have in today's climate, in today's world, your community needs to be diverse at all income levels and from all races, creeds, so on and so forth.
Okay, well, on the next clip, Keith will be discussing the Lambert K. Now, there have been some changes. This program was made about a month and a half ago. There's been some things happening over the last month or so on the Lambert K. And at a decision at the select meeting this week, they decided to give the, they got their paper that they owed to the builder, and they got it to them. He hasn't answered any phone calls according to the selectmen meeting. And they have given him an ultimatum to get back to us within 10 days, or we will consider dropping his proposal to buy the building and seek other options. So keep that in mind when he discusses Lambert K. But you can see Keith is very straightforward about it in this clip. Watch it and see for yourself.
The developer who we have on deposit for accessing some federal brownfield dollars to clean it up through a low-interest revolving loan. In fact, the developer is attending the board meeting next week to just brief the board on what's going on. Part of the problem is the current economy and the fact that there's not a lot going on in what his initial proposal was to do. There's not a big market for that. But the funds exist, the building exists. We just need to get, we're closer now than I think we were 6 months ago, but we're not quite there yet. We were cleaning up the parcel.
What is the stated purpose and use for the building?
It was a mixed use, but most of it was commercial retail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a good site for it. It just has cleanup issues. It's similar to any other building in a former mill town. We didn't know any better at the turn of the last century. What we were putting in the ground would come back to haunt us. Sure. I don't blame anyone. It's just we didn't know any better. And now we have to clean it up because we do know better. We can't utilize the old adage from when we used to send fire trucks out for gas spills and wash them down with volumes of water. The solution to pollution is dilution. It doesn't work that way anymore. There is a need to clean it up to be good stewards, but there is a cost associated with that. And part of the problem with some of our other buildings that may or may not be available is the cost of cleanup. When the cost of cleanup outweighs the cost of the building and any foreseeable profit for an extended period of time, people tend to walk away. They're not necessarily looking at flipping it to a quick buck, but they'd like to see a return in 10 to 12 years, not 20 to 30. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you talk about cleanup costs that exceed costs of buildings by threefold, the site is worth more demolished and clean than it is clean and still a building there. Plus, most of our buildings, with the exception, most of our buildings are not conducive to manufacturing anymore. Nobody wants to manufacture anything in a multi-story building. Mm-hmm. You want to do it in a single story, 100,000 square feet with 30 or 40-foot ceilings. Nobody wants to do multi-floor. It's just not the most efficient way to make anything. Besides that, Connecticut's an expensive state to make anything with. We regulate everything to death from an environmental standpoint, and our labor costs are high because of where we live and the education of our employees. That's not to say manufacturing is completely gone in the state. There's still some very vibrant manufacturers. Of course, with the legislature and the governor attempting to oppose a 10% corporate surcharge tax, sunsetted after 3 years, I'm not really sure who'll be left after that.
Okay, well, for those of you who read my green papers or followed this program since its inception, You know that one of the ways that I thought we were going to get some money to do this cleanup was to hurry up and get these major developments in down along the Northeast Corridor and try to use that money to for various aspects of the town, give some money to clean up these buildings, give some money to the schools to hire better teachers and more teachers, give some money to the schools to clean up all their buildings and make sure they met all the laws of the land, and then other money to get Highland Lake, clean up Highland Lake, present and future money, and that's kind of what happened. But that's still moving along. It's slowed down by the fact that we didn't sell 2 lots to the guy a couple of years ago that were up by his property. Not totally our fault. He was involved in that too a little bit. He had plans to do things on a piece of property that he thought he had a commitment from the town to sell him for $36,000, but he didn't. So that hurt us bad. That hurt us bad. And then what came later was the recession. And that whacked us again, the state, America, the world, and the town of Winchester. So it's kind of tough. This furniture factory, they need $3 million to make this thing viable. They got to get it from somewhere at a time when nobody wants to lend them any money or give them any money. But they're still trying. And we'll have to see over the years what happens there. Now, the next clip I will introduce is very apropos for this tonight, because it's a discussion of the water and sewer possible for the Enterprise Corridor between Winston and Torrington, Route 800 corridor, where a lot of our future factories, industrial, and some of the big developments are going to be and provide a lot of tax revenue, hopefully, for our town to be able to help get these businesses in, get the test scores up, get the businesses in, get the buildings cleaned up, and have more viable downtown where people can live and work in the town of Winchester. So this clip's about 3 minutes and 37 seconds, and it's very interesting.
Is to develop the 800 corridor, and to get down there, we're going to be needing to put sewer and water down in that location. I think we're all in agreement that's needed. How do you think that we'll be able to afford that, or how can we possibly get the money to do something like that?
Well, there are a couple different ways to finance sewer and water. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, whose funds we have utilized in this community in the past, be it through grants or low-interest loans, is available to fund projects such as sewer and water for development and public health. The conundrum I find when people talk about grants is that unless you're immune from paying income tax at the federal or state level, it's still your money. So there are different ways to finance projects with that. I've often said that if you bring me a viable project that requires water and sewer, and you take and as construction begins, so it's this concrete and steel, and throughout the negotiation process, you work with the developer or the owner of the building, and they finance the construction of the water and sewer, and we use a portion, keyword is a portion, of the newfound revenue to pay back the money they borrowed. Or we borrow the money and earmark the newfound revenue, because let's just use round numbers so I don't screw the math up. If you're going to garner $100,000 in new revenue from a structure, we borrow, or the developer borrows whatever is necessary to build the water and sewer or other infrastructure improvements, then we take half or a portion, I just use half because it's easy, $50,000, and use that as a payment toward the loan that was taken out, or the bond, to build the infrastructure improvements. Because 50% of something is still better than nothing. Granted, it takes a little while, and again, as you're both aware, perhaps one building or one manufacturer or one remodeling of one mill building is the catalyst. So your initial investment is being paid for by the revenue from one building, but as the flame spreads from building to building, from location to location with more buildings, your cost is going down and your revenue goes up. We only have one way to raise revenue, property tax. There are other ways, fees for service. However, in my opinion, that's not the best way to balance a budget. We could increase the building permit fees. We could increase the parking ticket fees. But we're talking about minuscule amounts of dollars. If we bring a new taxpayer in that pays $100,000 in taxes, we take $50,000 of that to pay down an infrastructure loan, we still have $50,000. You have to write a lot of parking tickets to garner $50,000. You have to do a lot of impact fees for $50,000. We need to be as friendly as possible with the developer, but obviously they need to take the biggest risk because they're garnering the biggest reward. But we need to do our part to make sure everything is seamless and efficient when they come to town. And that's what I hope to do with this Winstead Furniture Bill.
Okay, well, we've got the chart up here. I just want to make a few more comments here before we play the first two clips once again at the end of the program for those of you who came in, may have joined late. But right now what I'd like to say is that what he was professing there in that last clip was, well, let's all work together. Let's work with the developers. Let's work with the landowners. Let's work with the industries that want to come to town. Let's work with the industries that want to stay in town. Let's work with the builders that will be building speculative buildings in the town to try to attract industries, to try to attract small retail businesses or even large retail businesses, and to attract business to go down the enterprise corridor between Winston and Torrington. It's very simple. So it's a work together thing like they professed at the summit meeting when we were down there a year and a half ago. I can't remember exactly when, but it was in that sort of time frame. And that's what he's trying to do. Now I'd like to quickly show some of my preferences for the election. The first one I'm going to show tonight is Jay Budahazy's sign, because I'm a believer that Jay will help the Republicans if they get elected. If the Democrats get elected, he might have a little rougher time, but I still think he'll try to work with them as well. So, row D, J.R. Budahazy. He's a petitioner running for the Board of Selectmen. The next sign I want to show is a Republican sign, because I'm in favor of the Republicans keeping the majority in the next election and winning, so we can keep our continuity, we can keep going with our plans. We won't change 180 degrees and go in a different direction. Talk about the big bond issue, talk about not moving the projects along the enterprise corridor along fast enough, talk about removing the town manager. Now I want to say here that a lot of people say, hey, these Democrats don't have a platform. My view is they have a hidden platform. They don't talk much about it now because they're afraid you won't elect them. But that's the big bond issue. That's raising taxes. That's possibly removing the town manager if they can get 5 votes, which seems, I don't think that's going to happen, but if they get elected, that's what they would do. I think I heard that Althea wants to run the town like the Board of Education is run. I couldn't think of a bigger disaster than having that happen. And then I've also heard, I didn't watch the program, but I've heard that one of the Democrats said he'll give up his lawsuit if he wins as selectman. I would say, why doesn't he give up his lawsuit now? I still wouldn't vote for him, but that's just another story. So the next sign I want to show is the Democrats' Board of Education sign, because I think that we should get them in there because they're pro-Gilbert and they want to see the expenses get under control. So if we have that sign, Dave, put it up. Democrats running for the Board of Education. That's the Republicans running. You still got the Democrat one, the white one. Kathleen O'Brien and her two Democrat. It's a white sign. Well, if we can't find that, then let's show the independent sign quickly, because I think we ought to get Russell Dutton Buckner in there. I know he doesn't like the town manager and maybe not even the mayor, but he has so many good points that that will help us if he gets elected and works with the Republicans on most of the other issues. That's kind of the decision I made after I looked at the pros and cons of all this. And you can't find the Board of Education one with Kathleen O'Brien on it? Okay, if you find it, pop it up. And that's kind of it for tonight. We're going to show these last two clips. If Dave can't find the sign, we'll show it next week.
Going to be news tonight.
Well, Keith's going to cover most of that, and let me just say it's a pleasure to have Keith back with us, Bill. He's done an outstanding job as town manager to this point, and really have.
He's our first repeat guest.
He really have enjoyed work. In November, we all know that regardless of what happens, because of who's running for re-election, there'll be an almost entirely new board of directors with new faces.
There are only 3 incumbents seeking re-election out of 7 available seats.
Out of 7 people, so at the most there'll be 3 people there that already have experience with the government of this town. All of them have experience somehow with it. Not to say they don't. What would be your message to them? What should they be doing?
Post-election, we sit down and we set a vision and we work together. The most daunting task over the next year will once again be the municipal budget. Because the state revenue, if the biennium passes if the governor signs it or if she allows it to become law, the funding for fiscal 10-11 to cities and towns is exactly the same as 9-10, is exactly the same as 8-9. Our grand list has seen some growth, but nothing of any magnitude. So we will more or less have the same amount of revenue to spend that we have this year, with more demands on our infrastructure and other parts of the system. That will be the most difficult task come January when we begin, come January when we put the budget together and when the board begins to fine-tune it in the spring and it goes to the voters in May. That is the most daunting task, and we need to focus all our energies and skills on that task to make sure, again, I don't have all the right ideas, I don't have all the ideas, I'm willing to listen to any more ideas, but nobody likes to see any more positions eliminated through layoffs because it has a trickle-down effect that's detrimental to the entire community and the economy as a whole. So we need to be very smart and very accurate when it comes time to put this budget together, because it is the most important task of this incoming Board of Selectmen.